Anyway, yes, echo Bodhinaga, very, very warm welcome to everybody. And yeah, particularly warm welcome if you've not been to one of these Sangha Nights before. It would be lovely to meet you, but well, I'll meet you online. And welcome. So as Bodhinaga said, we're just starting a new theme in this series of Sangha Nights. And it's a theme that's going to run through all our activities over the next, I suppose, few months as we sort of come back together, having been meeting mainly online for the last ages, actually. In fact, it's a theme that underlies everything we do and everything we always have done at the Buddhist Center. And this theme, we're calling it Building the Buddha Land. Okay, if you're relatively new to the center, you might be asking yourself, what do we mean by building the Buddha Land? What's he talking about? And how could this be relevant to me and my practice of the Dharma? Well, those are the questions I hope to answer in this talk. And in the process, what I hope to do is to get across something about the vision of this center and how this vision translates into what we actually do, the way we do it. But to sort of canter up to those questions, I'm going to take a few steps back and talk about what motivates us to practice the Dharma in the first place. Most of us, probably all of us, start practicing the Dharma to benefit ourselves, to make ourselves happier in one way or another. That's perfectly natural and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And that's always going to be part of our practice. Maybe we practice the Dharma to weaken negative states or negative mental states or negative emotions that trouble us. Maybe we practice the Dharma to get more of really wonderfully pleasant, positive mental states that we've maybe had a glimpse of and then found more how to access them in meditation. Maybe we practice the Dharma to feel good about ourselves, to get a sense of meaning in our life when that seemed to be lacking before. These are all really, really good reasons to practice the Dharma. But I suppose in a way they're all about making ourselves happier. And as I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when we've been practicing for a while, if our practice is just about ourselves, we run into a problem. Because ultimately, the Dharma is about going beyond ourselves, as we think we are, as we are now. And trying to get beyond the self as we are now by focusing on the self as we are now runs into a contradiction. It's like being in a hurry to calm down, something like that. To keep having a really positive effect, to keep moving us forward, after a while, our practice needs an element that's not just about ourselves. The Dharma gives us really powerful ways of cultivating better states of mind, more positive emotions. But if our practice becomes just about that, just about making ourselves feel good, after a while, it turns into a sort of near enemy of the Dharma. So near enemy is a sort of phrase we use when something looks like something positive, but isn't. And there's a sort of near enemy of the Dharma, which is a sort of refined way of being selfish, a more refined way of being selfish. It's just all about me and my mental states. And practicing in this way, just focusing on that, we need to focus on that, but just focusing on that can actually make us more selfish. We can't be bothered with others because people are difficult. And when we're around them, they make us feel, all sorts of not so pleasant mental states. We don't want to do anything challenging. We don't want to sort of engage in any challenging things that might benefit the world because, well, they're difficult. They might cause stress or anxiety. So practicing this near enemy of the Dharma can actually make us more selfish, more cut off from others. And the Dharma tells us that the more we are just focused on ourselves, the more we are cut off from others, the more unhappy we will be. So practicing the Dharma just for ourselves after a while doesn't work. So to quote the great medieval teacher Tsongkhapa, who founded the tradition that the Dalai Lama is part of, he says about this, there is an incompleteness about practicing just for ourselves, which means that we do not benefit others and we do not benefit ourselves. There is a completeness about practicing for others, which means that we benefit others and we benefit ourselves. And I think this problem, this near enemy of the Dharma, just about feeling good for oneself, has always been there in Buddhism. As I say, Buddhism gives us very powerful ways of feeling better. But we see that in the way some Westerners approach the Dharma as a sort of private way of therapy, feeling good. And it seems to have reared its head, this near enemy, in the centuries after the Buddha's passing. In some quarters, it seems that the Dharma came to be seen as all about just freeing ourselves from mental states, retreating into a sort of cold, cut-off state of detachment. And the main evidence for that is that some practitioners obviously felt that there was an urgent need to get back to something closer to the spirit of the Buddha's original teaching. The Buddha frequently told his followers to practice for the welfare of the many, for the well-being of sentient beings. So he encouraged his followers not just to practice for themselves, but also to do it, to be of more use in the world, to stop being part of the problem and to become part of the solution. So this attempt to get back to something more like the original, more altruistic spirit of the Dharma that the Buddha taught, this became a really major movement in Buddhism. And it called itself the Mahayana, the great vehicle. Mahayana Buddhism became the main form of Buddhism in China, Tibet, Japan, most of the Buddhist world, in fact, and most of the Buddhists who ever lived have been Mahayana Buddhists. And the Mahayana restated the goal of the spiritual life to make it clear that the ideal Buddhist was not just someone who focused solely on their own, practicing for their own enlightenment, but the ideal Buddhist was someone who aimed to help all beings to become enlightened. They saw their own progress as part of that goal. There was someone who, as the Buddha said, practiced for the welfare of the many, for the well-being of the world. And this ideal Buddhist came to be called, the name that was coined for that was Bodhisattva, which means literally something like wisdom being or awakening being. And in Mahayana Buddhism, and this style of Buddhism became the mainstream style of Buddhism, Buddhas, or highly advanced practitioners, highly advanced bodhisattvas, were seen as creating a sort of sphere of influence around themselves that others could benefit from. Others could, as it were, live in this sphere of influence and benefit from it. So we can probably get a sense of that from our own experience of, well, our experience of being around somebody who is habitually in very positive mental states. Some people just give off a positive atmosphere. They seem to create a field around themselves, a positive field around themselves. That's good to be around. And enlightened beings were seen as doing that in a huge way, in a really big way, creating a field of influence that others with a connection to them could, as it were, live in. A beautiful, supportive environment which nurtured spiritual progress, where others could make spiritual progress, as it were, feed on be dragged along on the coattails of the practitioner, feed on their positivity. So yeah, practitioners, really advanced practitioners, would create this field of influence around themselves. And that brings us back to our theme. Because this sphere of influence was called a Buddha field, or a pure land, or a Buddha land. Buddha lands were often imagined sort of mythically as these literally places, almost like other dimensions or other world systems that people could go to, that had a connection with that Buddha or Bodhisattva. But one of the most famous, one of the most really influential Buddhist texts makes it clear that Buddha lands are in fact built of people. Buddha lands are made of sentient beings. They're made of people. They're a field of people, a field of sentient beings. A Buddha land is a community. A Buddha land is a community. It's a community that exists within the sphere of influence of traditionally a Buddha or Bodhisattva. And part of the practice of a Bodhisattva, the way that they benefited the world, was to attract a community, to gather a community around themselves, to attract people and create an environment, a community suffused with positive mental states, with positive emotion, suffused with the Dharma, in which people could flourish and grow. And this is what we mean by when we talk about a Buddha field. And this is what we are trying to create at Sheffield Buddhist Centre. It's not that any of us see ourselves as bodhisattvas. I mean, the founder of Triratna, Sangha Night, said, well, it might be quite dangerous to think of yourself as a bodhisattva. I am a bodhisattva. It's there might be quite a lot of pride in that, and pride's not going to help us to overcome the ego, is it? I mean, so he talks about, well, it's much safer, much more realistic, not to see ourselves as bodhisattvas, but to see ourselves as coming together with others to create, as it were, a bodhisattva, to engage in bodhisattva activity, to create, as it were, a bodhisattva which is bigger than any one individual. And this is what we try and do. So typically order members come together and try to create a positive dharmic community and try to attract people into this positive dharmic community to build a Buddha land around themselves and to attract people into it and then deepen it and make it more nurturing. And this is what Sangha Night says a Buddhist centre should be doing. So, well, we follow Sangha Night, so that's what we try and do. We're trying to create this is what we're trying to do at Sheffield Buddhist Centre. We're seeking to create a Buddha land, seeking to attract people to create a really positive community and attract people into it. And we do this for the benefit of others, but also for the benefit of ourselves, because these two really cannot be separated. The Dharma tells us we are not sort of standalone objects. We are part of our environment. We're intimately enmeshed with our environment. This is what non-self and Atman means. So unless we mutually create the sort of environment in which we can all make progress, none of us will make progress. So for our own sake, as much as for the sake of others, we build a Buddha land. We need to build a Buddha land. This is just, in a way, just as important as our own practice, possibly even more important than our own practice. These are two wings of the bird. We practice our individual practice. We create the Buddha land mutually, in which that we all need to make progress, without which we will not make progress. So that's what we're trying to do. How do we do it? So excuse me, it's lost in my notes. How do we do it? Okay, so Buddhism being Buddhism, we have a list. Hooray. we're given some clear advice on how to go about this. We're given a list. And this goes right back to the time of the Buddha. And it's introduced in a story about a Buddhist, a disciple of the Buddha's called Hataka. Hataka is a householder. And obviously he's been a disciple of the Buddha. And the Buddha has then gone away. The Buddha has gone away. And the next time the Buddha comes back to where Hataka lives, Hataka goes to see the Buddha, but he doesn't go alone. He goes, the sutta says, with 500 disciples, 500 people. And the Buddha says, well, Hataka, how did you gather such a large community? How did you gather such a large community of practitioners? And Hataka says, no, just did what you told me. I did what you told me to do, Lord. I practiced the 4 means of unification. They're called the 4 means of unification. Firstly, generosity, dana. I attracted people to join us by generosity, and by our shared generosity, we created this highly positive atmosphere amongst us, which attracted people in. By kindly speech, by positive speech, we created around ourselves a world, a positive, attractive, supporting world, which attracted people in and deepened our practice. By beneficial activity, by mutual help, but also by passing on the Dharma, which has such a beneficial effect on people and their lives. And by exemplification, by giving people an example of what they could be so that we all bring out what is best in each other. So I practice these 4 means of unification that you taught me. Generosity, kindly speech, beneficial activity, and exemplification. And the Buddha says, excellent, Hataka, excellent. Everybody who has ever created a large spiritual community, anyone who's ever gathered a large following, created a large spiritual community, has done it by practicing these 4 Samgravastis, these 4 means of unification. Anyone who will create a large spiritual community in the future will do so by practicing these 4 means of unification. Okay, the Buddha's told us we need to practice the 4 means of unification if we wish to gather a community. So these 4, generosity, kindly speech, beneficial activity, and exemplification, they come to be known as the 4 Samgrahavastus, which I think literally does mean something like grounds of unity. They're the tools for gathering and deepening and creating a community. They're the tools for building a Buddha land. And these 4 become incredibly important in Mahayana Buddhism. It becomes a very important list because these are the ways of gathering a community. And because a really important part of a bodhisattva's practice is precisely to gather a community around themselves. And to help those beings to develop and grow. And of course, this is what we're trying to do here at Sheffield Buddhist Centre. This is, in fact, what Sangha tells us we should be doing. He says in one of his seminars, we should be gathering a community by the practice of the Samgrahavastus. That's what a Buddhist Centre is about. So that's what we're trying to do at Sheffield Buddhist Centre. We're gathering and deepening and trying to unify a spiritual community through the practice of these 4 Samgrahavastus. So these 4 Samgrahavastus come to underlie absolutely everything we do, or we try to make them underlie everything we do. So we have a dana economy. The first of the Samgrahavastus is dana. All Dharma events are free. And all teaching is done for no financial reward or just for the meagerest support if that's needed. The centre is supported financially by the community, by the Sangha, by the freely given generosity of the Sangha, many of whom are in the position to do so, support us through a standing order. A certain amount of money is needed to keep things going. There's a lot of volunteering opportunities. A lot of volunteering goes on. The centre depends a lot on volunteering. You've heard about some of the volunteering opportunities that are coming up. All of these ways, they're ways in which the Sangha is built on generosity. We don't charge. We don't have a marketing economy. A Sangha, a community, a true community, is characterized by generosity, not by a sort of "I'll do this for you if you do that for me" approach. I think it's vitally important. It creates a positive atmosphere. It creates metta. It creates gratitude, mutual metta. It creates a really nice environment, and you don't charge people to be part of your community. You don't charge people to be part of your community. A community either supports itself or it doesn't exist. So we have a dana economy, and that's really important. And we make a point of positive speech. We make a point of speaking positively, expressing metta, encouraging, praising others' qualities, rather than focusing on the negative. That doesn't mean we ignore the truth, but there's a choice involved here. Very, very often, we seem to focus on the negative, ignoring the positive, and that's just as untrue, no more true to the facts than looking for the positive and talking it up. So we choose to reverse that. And speaking positively, well, yes, again, it creates metta. It means we create a positive atmosphere and we bring out the best in each other. We practice beneficial activity. Of course, in any real community, people help each other. And in the Sangha, there's a lot of mutual help, both in practical things and in the sense of emotional support and spiritual friendship. But the traditional commentaries, when they talk about beneficial activity, they particularly emphasize passing on the Dharma as the most important of the beneficial activities, because the Dharma is seen as the real answer to people's problems. If we have the Dharma, our other problems become much less oppressive. So we try to pass on the Dharma as best we can, to as many people as we can, in as many ways as we can. And we offer it for free, and we try to communicate it well. We try to hone our skills to communicate it well. And finally, exemplification. The word samanatata literally means sameness, and it's interpreted in several different ways, but probably the easiest is just exemplification. To create a spiritual community, we need to practice the Dharma ourselves. We need to become more like the people we have the potential to be. We need to exemplify what we teach. We're trying to create a Buddhist spiritual community, not just any old community of nice people, although that would be a very good thing to do, but we're trying to create a spiritual community, a Buddhist spiritual community. And to do that, we need to live the Dharma ourselves, to exemplify it as much as we can. So these are the ways that we try to put this teaching into practice at Sheffield Buddhist Centre in the way we do what we do. These are the ways we try to build a Buddha land, to create a positive environment, attract people into that positive environment so we can all grow and develop in the midst of a society that all too often is not a positive environment for growing and developing. Sangha actually talks about it as creating a mini pure land in the midst of the impure land. And we do this as an essential part of our own practice to benefit ourselves as much as to benefit others, because we're not separate from the environment we exist within. And unless we mutually create that positive environment, none of us is going to get anywhere. A solitary, individualistic practice just about oneself is not an option. It won't get us anywhere. So finally, just to round off, how can we each play our part in building the Buddha land through the Sangha ambassadors? Well, we can take part in the Dharma economy for a start. A lot of people choose to do this by supporting the centre financially through a standing order. But there's no obligation whatsoever to do that. Nobody is under any obligation to do that. And not everybody will want to do it. There's no obligation. But if we do want to contribute in that way, it's a really useful way of helping to build the Buddha land. We can also volunteer in various ways. We've heard about some of them today. We had a Sangha Works Day a week or so ago, or the weekend rather, and there's opportunity to paint the centre. There's opportunities to volunteer in the garden, to help in the garden, to help in the Dana Cafe, the aptly named Generosity Cafe, to give our skills in a whole variety of ways. We can give our time to support classes and retreats. And all of this makes a big contribution to the spiritual community. Without it, we wouldn't have a spiritual community. And it's a great way of getting to know others and forming bonds of friendship, which is what creates a Sangha. It's also often great fun. And we can just turn up to classes and retreats to be part of the community. Unless we turn up, there is no community. And often just turning up when we don't necessarily feel like it is the most important act of generosity we can make. We turn up for others as much as we turn up for ourselves. And that's particularly it's important all the time, but it's particularly perhaps important when we've been practicing a while and have something to offer others. But we turn up to create a community. If none of us turns up, no community. None of us gets anywhere. When others aren't there, we miss them. When we are there, others miss us. So we turn up as an act of generosity. So that's how we can practice generosity. Secondly, we can practice kindly speech, priyavadita. We can make a conscious practice to speak in a kindly and positive and encouraging way, looking to speak what is positive rather than focusing on faults. There will always be faults in anything involving human beings. Get over it. There will always be faults in anything involving human beings. If we focus on them, well, that's the sort of life we'll lead. But there's also a load of positive, and we draw that out. We make it more part of our world by talking it up. And of course, we avoid any gossip or backbiting, because that is just so corrosive and so destructive of any sense of unity in the Sangha, of any Sangha. We practice beneficial activity, helping others and being helped by others in all sorts of ways. That can be practical, but we can also be a friend to others, offer support and encouragement, sympathy, just being there for others. And a lot of people who've been around for longer, especially people who are training to join the order, also make a point of developing their skills in communicating the Dharma so that they can engage in beneficial activity that way by passing on the Dharma to others. And finally, of course, we can exemplify what we teach, exemplify what we talk about as much as we can. None of us is going to be perfect, but we exemplify it to the extent that we can. We actually practice the Dharma, we live the Dharma. Unless we do that, we're not a spiritual community. We're just a group. So we need bricks to build the Buddha land, and we are those bricks. Well, actually, the traditional sort of images of the Buddha land say it's built out of jewels, not bricks, that give off light for everybody. So perhaps we should say that what we need to do is to practice the Dharma so that we transmogrify ourselves from bricks into jewels and become suitable building material for the Buddha land. Thank you.